Hello. Today is December 5th, 2024, and you're listening to the Biased Media Company podcast. Today we'll be discussing the post-mortem on the Harris campaign, the future of the Democratic Party, another round of Trump administration picks, and a couple of other stories we missed since we last saw you. I'm your host, John George, as always, and joining me are my co-hosts, Slade and Emma. So, let's get into it. Let's talk about the sort of collective post-mortem of the Harris campaign that everybody has sort of been doing for the last month or so. It hasn't even been a month.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
It's insane. It feels like so much longer than that.
I know, I feel like I've aged like 10 years since then.
It's been so stressful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a pretty broad consensus, like online and some of these more progressive spaces, that Kamala Harris did not do enough to reach out to people like us, or people that are the policies that will benefit the broad majority of Americans.
Yeah, I mean, we invited Harris onto the show multiple times.
Yeah, we've not heard back.
When we would have, I feel like we could have convinced the Pennsylvania, at least. We could have held Pennsylvania.
Yeah, to be fair, she also didn't go on many podcasts. So.
Right. Famously, Joe Rogan was one that she missed.
Yeah, and that's been a lot of the discourse, right? Is like,
right.
Did she do enough podcasts?
Did she do enough podcasts? Listen, I'm going to be honest with you, podcasts are worthless. I know how that sounds, but the fact that anybody can get a podcast doesn't mean that anybody should. We're the exception, though, because we're so smart and different and funny and pretty.
Facts.
Right. I get that it's like sort of a reliability thing, or like, the ability to communicate with people. I don't think that Joe Rogan is anything other than a propaganda piece, because he's a bit of an idiot. And it's clear that there's been like a very hard swing to the right in those spaces. And they've sort of become, and this is part of like the generational battle that progressives are losing right now, is that, the alt-right, the right wing, anything right of center has dominated those spaces, and the people that are most susceptible to believing things they hear on podcasts are, young men.
Mm-hmm.
And we are,
and they've got a lot better at branding themselves, for sure,
right?
Since like the 2016 days, even.
Right, exactly. Although I do still think that there is some merit to the argument that we should be trying to go into those spaces and talking to people. I mean, Bernie Sanders did it, and I remember giving him trouble for it, but you know what? Bernie Sanders was right.
Yeah, I mean, we need to get out into the spaces that we are not I feel like the Democrats have a stuck-up kind of point of view. They're like, well, we're too good for going 100%. On that. And that shows. Like, it shows to people. And you're not reaching the people who honestly probably aren't going to change their minds, but could. You don't know. You haven't tried to reach out to them. You just kind of written them off.
Yeah, right. Actually, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that specifically, because I was in, I was back home. I mean, I am back home since I graduated, but I was in, a hometown bar, and I was drunk, and I was having this conversation with somebody I went to high school with. And I was talking about the idea that, liberals and the left, we absolutely do look down on people. Mm-hmm. And we do really like our academic structured language and verbiage, and we really kind of need to ease off on that, because that can be, to me, I think that it's very off-putting. I
agree.
We need to get better at messaging. That's all of us, both, progressives.
I think we need to have liberals. A message.
Well, there's that.
Well, the Democrats, anyways, but
sure. I do think we need to sort of move away. And it's kind of tough, because how do you cede ground to a fervent, anti-intellectual movement,
right?
But the average working person they get turned off by this, academic speak that we're very fond of.
I don't think it comes down to like being anti-intellectual. I think it just comes down to talking to people in language that they use and can understand. And then again, that's not even like to say that they aren't intelligent. It's just that like most people don't have political science degrees.
Right.
Yeah,
Like most
it's a
people aren't going to
different
spend all this
space.
time in academia and like reading this kind of language.
Right.
The point that I'm really trying to make there is not that they're less intelligent, just that, the intelligentsia is very exclusionary.
Mm-hmm.
And we like to think of ourselves as smart, educated people, and just because we are educated doesn't mean we're smart. That's
Right.
that's a different thing. But we like
Case in point, the
the
Harris
I
campaign.
Facts.
exactly. The Harris campaign had more college degrees than the Trump campaign did, and we lost.
I've seen some stupid people in college.
Right, right. We all went to the
Yeah.
same college. We
Yeah.
knew those people quite intimately. Some of them
And
are
I've
our
seen some
friends.
crazy smart people who never went to college.
Right, right, right. So the point is that the way that we structure our language and our messaging can be alienating because we rely too heavily on big fancy words when we need to be breaking down these concepts. And I
I
think
agree.
this was sort of the wider point of my conversation that I had. I'm only remembering portions of it because I was drunk, full disclosure. But, the idea that a lot of the concepts that we as progressives and leftists advocate for are things that people like. But the problem is we use the language of, academia for it, or we use, the terms that have been villainized by the right too
Yeah.
much, and that turns people off, and we have to figure out a way to sort of package these ideas in a way that makes sense, which is why I was a big fan of Walls is saying he wasn't a socialist, he was just being neighborly. We need more
Yeah.
stuff like that. We need more stuff
Yeah.
like that in our lexicon.
So
I think he
there's
actually would have been a great messenger for an actual progressive campaign. Um,
absolutely.
I'm kind of worried that his chances are kind of shot now.
I know, because it was unfortunate because it felt like such a big win for the progressive wing of the party when he was
Mm-hmm.
tapped to be the VP, only
Mm-hmm.
for them to immediately shunter him and throw him off to the sidelines.
Yeah,
And that
it's
was
really
I believe that
disappointing.
was I believe that was a fatal mistake for the Harris campaign, because let's talk about the leadership for the
Can
Harris
I
campaign.
hop
Of
back real
course.
quick to the language?
Yeah.
So there's one example that just popped into my mind that I'm mad that I didn't think of before now, but is really good was when Andrew Yang was running and he was running with universal basic income, but he didn't use the term universal basic income. He used the term freedom dividend because he did focus groups and he tested out with real Americans what sounded the best. And then when you're able to kind of get past the name and go into what does it actually mean, then we can get things done. And so we need to be able to not always call it the very specific academic term that we have for it. We can call it other things and then explain what it is.
Right. I think that's a very succinct and perfect example of what we're trying to talk about, because freedom dividends sounds ridiculous. It sounds like you're getting, a machine gun, a lifted truck, and a American Eagle once a year or fiscal quarter or whatever. But in, reality, it's about selling these concepts that we've been advocating for a very long time
Mm-hmm.
using language that people are like. I mean, like, you know,
I think
look at
Medicare for All was a pretty good example.
that was a great
Yes.
example. Again, there's a common theme with the progressive elements of, the past 3 to 4 presidential campaigns being stifled and thrown to the side.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that is to blame at the Obama era Democrats that are running every aspect of the party and our presidential campaigns, because they suck at their jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to use this opportunity to hop into, Pod Save America recently had on the top strategists for the Harris campaign, including her campaign manager, a number of other sources, and it's frustrating listening to them. I don't know, like I encourage people to go check it out. I can't say it's terribly interesting unless you're going to be unless you want to be angry, but like I mean, I think it's pretty revealing that they just did not take away from this anything that like I mean, there's no conversation about like moving things in a more progressive direction. Gaza wasn't mentioned a single time throughout the whole the whole interview.
Yeah, which is
which I think
ridiculous.
is pretty. I mean, I think that Pod Save America should take a lot of flack for that, for not directly asking them. But also just it should have came up organically.
I think it's obnoxious the amount that Democrats in power have just been ignoring the issue, with so many people, especially of our generation, having such an issue with the way it's being handled. And instead of addressing it, it's just being straight up ignored in most
Yeah.
circles.
And including like right-leaning people too, right? I mean, like the Republicans have kind of built up a rhetoric of being like anti-war, ironically.
Mhm.
And then the Harris campaign turned around and invoked Dick Cheney. And it's misreads like that just like, I mean, they blow my mind. Like I don't think you could have picked a worse person to have as like a symbol of your campaign than Dick Cheney, especially when we're fucking committing an act of genocide right now in the Middle East.
Mhm.
Yeah, I really think it speaks to sort of this misalignment between the messaging of the Harris campaign and the actual day-to-day operation of it. I mean, because, Harris was, the campaign was really driving the point that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, right? And that is a true statement. He absolutely is a threat to democracy, and democracy is going to be having a rough time over the next few years. But in the way that they ran the campaign, they showed that they didn't believe that. The fact that they weren't fighting for it. They were like, okay, we're gonna try this. We don't think this is gonna work, but we're gonna try this anyway because because it feels good to have Liz Cheney on stumping for you. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean,
it's the mythical.
It's the mythical moderate.
Yeah, the
Yes.
mythical moderate, and
yeah, and like Emma, you mentioned like the focus group thing earlier. Like, I'm sure that basically everything Kamala Harris said was focus tested. And I kind of think that there's like a misread you get when you're asking people in a room, like, which of these policies would you like? And you're testing these like messaging things against them versus like what plays out in the field and like a broader, like,
Yeah.
It's different than having people in a room and having them check mark the things that they want to hear versus having to actually have that out in the field. And like when you're like this whole elections are a battle for the spotlight, right? And you can't get heads turning towards you, like you can't draw in attention when you're promising like a tax credit for some small businesses.
Yeah.
Like people aren't going to get excited about that. And like I know, like I've known that like personally, trying to talk to people about like what Kamala Harris is going to do, and it's really hard to get excited about tax cuts for small businesses, right? I mean I think like very few people in our generation are small business owners,
and it's just hard to get excited for almost no change, like for the promise of we're going to keep things just about the same but maybe a little better.
Yeah,
I mean
there was on the edges.
There was also the point too that there were like some really good ideas in the party platform for the Harris campaign. Like the aid for first time home buyers was a big deal. And here's
I was excited about that.
I was excited about that too. And here's the thing that really struck me. And also, the child tax care credit or the child care tax credit. And here's the thing that absolutely infuriates me is that after the election, you saw people being excited about those parts of Harris's platform because they thought that was Trump's platform. And it's like, okay, so where was in the messaging pipeline, where was the mistake that led, people to hear these things like, oh, because I think that a lot of people, like your average swing voter, probably associates the stimulus checks from the COVID years very strongly with Donald Trump. I mean, and that was sort of the big push for when they were finally forced to do.
I mean, Trump delayed those so that he could get his signature on them.
Right.
You know that?
That's literally disgusting.
Yeah.
Oh,
and it worked. And
And
it
it
works.
works.
And it's how do you fight that? It's again, we have to go back to a more, rougher, and not rough as in like, violent, but rougher as in gritty in fighting dirty style of politics that we sort of, very working
Yeah.
class attitude towards politics as opposed to this, holier than thou,
I
self-righteous.
I
I
completely
agree.
agree.
I was reading Bernie Sanders' book, this recent one about like the 2020 to 2023 years, and he's talking about like the battle for Build Back Better and how, they couldn't get a lot of what they wanted passed because of the filibuster, but they were passing a lot of stuff through reconciliation bills and recovery bills that can't be filibustered. And they weren't able to get a lot through because of this position called the Senate parliamentarian, which serves as like an advisor to the Senate. And they have the power. They're an unelected official. They're a staffer, and they have the power to say what can and can't be included in the reconciliation bill. Like, the majority leader has the power to dismiss this person. And she blocked a lot of the most progressive things that the Democrats are trying to push through during this period. And the Democrats had full power to just like oust her. Like, they could put in whoever they wanted in that position. And Republicans have done the same thing when they had the Senate and like when they're in similar positions. And like the Democrats refused. Like, they wouldn't do that, even though like no one cares about this position. You're not going to offend anybody by doing this. This is the unelected official. But they won't do it because they're trying to uphold norms and the institutions.
Like, I get if you're fighting a fair fight, I understand wanting to follow the rules, wanting to be admirable, but we're not fighting a fair fight. We're fighting with people who are throwing sand in your face. Like, you have to do
It's
something.
it's the prisoner's dilemma, right?
Yeah.
Like ideally we're both in the square where we're both cooperating and we get things done and like we both mutually benefit from this. But right now we're in the era where the Republicans are not cooperating and the
Mm-hmm.
Democrats are not, and the Democrats are, they're trying to. And because of that, the Republicans are massively rewarded for that.
Absolutely.
So we need to get into the square on the opposite side of that, where both of us are fighting dirty, both getting some things out of this.
Yeah,
really
because I
think
mean,
I really think the party needs to show working people that they're willing to get their hands dirty to fight for them. Because, I
absolutely.
mean, like, there's this sort of widely held belief that, I think your average voter, the average person, your average American even, is deeply anti-establishment. Like, that is
Mhm.
ingrained. I remember growing up and hearing people like, oh, the classic both sides are the same, all politicians are corrupt. Like, that's a conversation I would have with my mom, who was, like, apolitical, and she would be like, I'd be like, Trump's a liar, and she's like, all politicians lie. And I was like, okay, but there's like, there's a difference.
There are
Right.
degrees.
There are degrees of this, but you have to be able to convince that type of person, because that's a more common sentiment than I
Yeah.
think anybody's willing to admit, to be like, okay, you have to find a way to push back against that and to show that, we have to make being anti-establishment cool again. And of course, that's going to freak out the establishment, because the establishment Dems have enriched themselves as the party is fractured. And, they've run campaigns they've lost, and they pat themselves on the back, and they'll be like, we'll try again in 4 years. And
Yeah, and I think the Republicans have a pretty big advantage on us at this point because they fought this battle in 2016, right? None
Right.
of them wanted Donald Trump to be the guy, but he was, and I think they went through a long period of growing pains. But I mean, at this point, they're coded much more as anti-establishment, as populist, and that's really scary because they're
Mhm.
not. They're fake populists. They're not going to actually
Yeah.
help people broadly, but they've successfully like branded themselves as such.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think we're at a scary point because we're effectively a decade late on getting our shit
Yeah.
together on this front.
Absolutely.
And I was really worried about this with Joe Biden too, like in 2020. Like, it's just setting us back another 4 years
Mm-hmm.
of, you're going to bring in like this incredibly old politician
Yeah.
who,
I'm tired of
was the
old politicians.
VP of the last administration. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like the fact that Obama didn't immediately, Obama dissuaded Biden from running after, in
Yeah.
in 16. And I feel like
Mhm.
that should have been the end of it. If you serve as vice president and you're president, it's like this guy should not be anywhere near the Oval Office anymore. You should call
Yes.
it quits.
Right.
But Joe
I
Biden
mean,
is,
he also chose
ruthlessly
to back
ambitious.
Hillary Clinton, who is very much in the same vein.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, again, this is the disconnect between the elite Democrat, the elite echelon of the Democratic Party, and us progressives who are trying to push things to the left. They legitimately, I feel like they can't even tell. They're so far removed from the day to day and the average American experience that they just don't understand it. And
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's and
and that's like, so, going back to this interview, like there was no message for like what needs to happen in the future. Like
Mhm.
you still hear the same like it was the whole conversation was extremely like technocratic. It was the language we were talking about earlier. But also, like, at the very end, they were asked, like, so what do the Democrats need to do from here? And they're like, we need to do more effort in reaching, like, Latinos and getting back that base and, like, Latino men. And it's like, why are you even thinking in these terms still?
Yes.
I don't know. Like, it's just frustrating that everything has to be, like, the whole population has to be coded into these, like, demographics. So you have to, like, work to court instead of having, like, a foundational message that
Mhm.
resonates across, all demographics that
Yeah.
people can unite behind.
right, because I think it's just simply the wealthy Ivy League educated people running the Democratic Party and the Democratic campaigns just simply can't comprehend
No,
that
they're
it's a
very much in
class
their
thing.
own echo chamber.
Yeah.
Right,
They're
right,
completely
yeah,
removed. Like they don't experience the same things. They don't understand the way the average American thinks. And like I'm not going to say I do necessarily, but I at least try. And I think the Democrats need to try to like ask people, like figure it out, talk to people, talk to real human beings. Stop talking about them and start talking to them.
right,
Yeah, and
right.
like this kind of like with the podcast conversation too, like, the meme right has been we need a Joe Rogan of the left. But, Joe Rogan was not a right winger even until like a
Yeah.
few years ago. And his podcast was not originally about politics. And
Mhm.
even now it like, it goes back and forth. And like this right wing media ecosystem, I mean, some of it was top down for sure, but a lot of it was very organic, right? It came from the ground up.
Mhm.
And that's not something that can be, I mean, that's not something that you can just dump like $300 million into
Right.
and then
Right.
have this fully functional like system running. And
I mean,
like the right
yeah, this
increasingly more so is in tap with that network of people.
and the longer that we go without addressing this, the harder and harder it gets to reverse this trend.
Yeah,
Like it
and like
is
the
Absolutely.
reason, and
deeply ingrained. Like, little boys right now, Gen Alpha kids who are in school right now know Andrew Tate and they know all of his nonsense and they're believing that, and you can see that entire generation of young men is being captured by the
Mhm.
right wing and in these internet spaces and the manosphere and all of that. And there needs we do need to figure out a way to fight that, beat for beat and sort of turn that around. And I feel like that's a very big task. And I don't know if any of us have the answer for how to do that. It's definitely a multifaceted thing, but it has to be organic. It can't be something we prop up by just dumping a bunch of money at the problem, because that is inherently the problem. Is the
Right.
fact that, the Democratic elite has become the party of the wealthy, somewhat woke, you know,
kind of,
white, like kind of woke as in the utilizing the language of intersectionality
yeah,
to dismiss the intersections. Like that's what
right.
I mean. It's a bastardization of woke. I mean, woke is a
Mhm.
term
The
that has seen a lot of that lately. Woke is not a bad thing. It's just it's used in a way specifically, very specifically, to beat down, minority voices.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
the Democrats' answer to this is going to be to have like those corporate PR training videos about like not sexually harassing people or like making racist comments and just showing that on repeat to everybody. That would be
Literally.
their like solution to this.
Right, right. And that's again, that's the problem. It's too clean. It's too academic. We need more, we need more working class style. We need more, a conversation you would hear at a diner than rather than, this $2,000 plate fundraiser
Yeah,
small talk that the Democratic Party is so fond of.
I
We need
agree.
to we need
Yeah,
to beat that
and
back, and we need to, I mean, like, look at us here. Like, we all have the academic training, sure, that a lot of these people have. I mean, it's not Ivy League. It's not even remotely good. But taking another shot, like, I always got to take a shot at SUNY Potsdam.
Literally.
Actually, the political science department in SUNY Potsdam was didn't seem all that bad. They
The
used to be really
professors were
good.
excellent.
I love those guys.
I love
Yeah.
those guys. Yeah, shout out to the professors working, over there. They're great. Love those guys. I was such a poor student. I wish I could talk to them. But I was like, I feel like, again, I suffered from such severe executive dysfunction during my last couple of years that I think that would be a bad idea. Anyway, right, we need to figure out, the conversations that we're having, we're not afraid to use language that might be a little loaded or a little bit
Right.
antagonistic, and that's, it's not something that if we had an HR department, they would be screaming at us every other word.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And
and I
that's what we
also,
need more of.
and it's hard because I also think that there has been like fair attempts at this. Like, are you guys aware of like the dirtbag left term, like that kind of function of the internet?
That sounds like old school, like 2016 era
Yeah, yeah, no, it
stuff.
definitely is. But like that was definitely an attempt, and it's still like somewhat alive of leftists that are not afraid to like sling shit and talk shit to people.
Mhm.
And I don't know, like in some ways, I think that succeeded, but it's still largely online. But it doesn't resonate upwards, which
Right.
is again like the problem here. I mean, the Democrats, like they the biggest grassroots movement of the whole last 4 years was the pro-Palestine protests, and they
Yeah,
completely alienated themselves from that group. And like that's like this is what you need to carry elections. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing that like you had this like organic, passionate group of people that like they would have fought for you. They would have fought for you.
absolutely.
Um, and I think like some of that is even like like the attacks on like the Bernie bro, quote unquote,
Hmm.
labeling in like 2016. Like this is again this is like a passionate demographic of people that love their candidate, right? That will
Yeah,
fight for their candidate, and then you reject it, like and then like
literally.
you're smearing this guy and you're smearing this base, um, of people who are like the who are fighters, like the
Yeah.
people that you need to run this shit.
I mean, like,
I
I was so passionate about Bernie. I had not felt that way about another politician in the past. I still haven't felt that way about many politicians. I went to several of his rallies. I volunteered. I helped out a lot, and it was awesome. And then the Democrats tanked him, and I have disdain for the Democrats in
right.
power.
I mean, like, again, I was also that was my introduction to politics. I mean, like, to
Hmm.
sort of put it into
Mhm.
context, Bernie Sanders. Like, I grew up, in a very controlling, Christian fundamentalist sect, and they were explicitly non-political. And I remember when I was leaving, I was sort of trying to like find myself, and one day I saw, Bernie Sanders give an interview. And my whole life I had held the opinion that, politicians are all corrupt sleazebags, they're all terrible people. And I listened to Bernie Sanders and it was like, wow, if there's anybody genuine in politics, it's this guy. And ever since then, I mean, now I have a degree in politics, and so obviously that was sort of my gateway to becoming an engaged and an informed voter, and somebody who is sort of approached politics as an academic discipline. That would not have happened without Bernie Sanders, and I can't help but feel that my story is not unique to myself. The details, sure, but
I don't think so
the
either.
wider Bernie Sanders brought in a lot of people into politics that otherwise were going to be completely disconnected and
Absolutely.
not going to be a part of it. And how did the DNC thank him for that? They did it by slandering him. They did it by, I mean, let's not, I won't fall into the argument of, 2016 got rigged or anything like that. But 2020 definitely, with, the everybody dropping out at the same time and endorsing Biden. You can't, that was such a bold face attempt to sort of stop the bleeding, and it's so disappointing that it's disgusting that they rallied behind Joe Biden, who has now shown himself his true colors of being ruthlessly ambitious and not caring about the country or the party or any of that, and simply wanting the job for the sake of having the job. And he is a lot of what we have accused Donald Trump of doing. And, Biden held on for so long. I mean, as
I'm staying in the race.
Right, and he was doing that until Nancy Pelosi was coming out.
Yeah.
And threatening to beat him down. So it's like...
Yeah, I mean, I think she effectively threatened to sink the entire party.
Right, because he was doing it anyway, and he did anyway, because that was his last FU to the people, he was like, okay, we're not going to do any sort of democratic process for the convention. You're going to nominate Harris. I'm going to ruin Harris's chances of doing that, of actually winning, and then force you to be stuck with Harris. I mean, I liked Harris not because of, I liked Harris simply because, it seemed she wasn't ideal, but I couldn't think of anybody that was at that point. And it was so close to the convention. I mean, I'll eat my words. I was definitely wrong on this, and I felt that she could win. And maybe she could have if there wasn't...
I struggled to think of a way that, a quick, nomination, a quick primary, would have been feasible.
Right, the logistics of it alone seems like, how are we going to pull that off? Who was going to be at the table? Were we going to end up with Liz Cheney under the Democratic nomination? Is that how that was going to go? Because, I mean, who do you think were who were the delegates at the convention? They were all Joe Biden's delegates. Do you think they were going to be progressive? I don't think so. It felt like, and again, because Joe Biden was so hard for Israel, and we couldn't pivot. That's what cost us Michigan. Although, again, this is that point where I'm going to say, what the heck to the people who in Michigan, Muslim Americans who voted for Trump, thinking he was going to be better on Gaza. That was really, really bad. Yeah, there was no way around. There's no way around it. That was the really poor decision. I mean, I don't want to fall into the trap of blaming voters for what they did, but there was a lot of people who very clearly voted off of vibes instead of any semblance of rational thought.
Absolutely.
And I mean, look at all those people who learned what terrorists were after the election. Look at how many of those people that complained about how, I lost my Christmas bonus because my company is afraid of tariffs. But it's super important that we don't fall into that, Schadenfreude and sort of revel in that, because we do need to win people back. And the only way that that's going to work is not by calling them idiots, not by calling them dumb.
In my opinion, it's not the voters' fault. I would like to hold individual people accountable for their own political literacy, but it's not their fault. The Republicans have been cutting education for decades. Politicians in power have been trying to get a public like we have. And so we can't I do fall into that sometimes, and I would love to be able to say you just need to educate yourself, you just need to do it. But that's not possible for a lot of people. And a lot of people don't know how to. A lot of people don't have the time or the energy. A lot of people just don't know that they should. They think they're politically literate, but they're not. And it is the job of our government to make that consistent knowledge, to teach that to people, to explain critical thinking. You need to think through these things, not just the surface thing. But they don't want that. They don't want a population that is going to question them and that is going to ask why they're doing this and understand the mechanisms in which they work.
Right. I think, Emma, you raise a very good point about that. This is where we're at right now is by design, and this is a design that has been in progress since, Nixon. Fox News came about because they wanted to prevent Nixon, a Nixon situation from ever happening again. And look, it works. Reagan has been attacking the Department of Education ever since, the Department of Education stopped, work to stop segregation in schools.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't let go of that. These institutions have been under attack for, nearing a century now, some of them, for some of them as long as they've been around. And, we do need to sort of swallow our pride here and practice what we preach here about not blaming people for being duped by that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
Because
mean,
it
again,
was
I
by
I think
design.
it comes back. I think it comes back to like the top-down messaging. Like Donald Trump spoke to economic concerns better than Harris did, even though his like solutions were bullshit. Like I don't know. Like I saw a graph showing that like by the end of the campaign, Donald Trump was talking about the economy twice as much as Kamala Harris was.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel that Harris did certainly avoid a lot of the pitfalls that Clinton fell into. It was clear that, that
Yeah,
populism is what we need going forward. And I know that that's such a scary thing because populism truly is a dangerous, can be a very dangerous thing.
right. But it's also democracy,
It
right?
is. Yeah, yeah,
It's a
yeah.
dictatorship of the many.
And so that's sort of, that is the only path forward. We need to be progressive. We need to be pro working class. We need to make a genuine difference in people's lives and point to that relentlessly and show that we did that. We did that for you. We're going to keep doing
Yeah,
that for you because we can take big
you know,
socialist concepts and we can break it down into language that people like and aren't immediately going to, you know, revolt against because, it's been demonized by years and years and years of conservative propaganda.
I
Like, that's the
can't
simple
like
truth.
one of like the craziest like political blunders to me from the Biden administration is how like all of the best things that were in Build Back Better or in the Inflation Reduction Act aren't going to take effect until like 2026. Like
Yeah.
Medicare being able to negotiate drug prices
Yeah.
with prescription companies, that doesn't kick in until 2026.
I know, and I mean that's
Capping
just
insulin prices at $35 a month isn't going to kick in until 2025.
I know, and that's just a fault of our system and how it's designed that these things
Well, but
take
it
so
could have
long.
no, but it could have been like sooner. But like they bent it to like pharmaceutical interests that wanted to have another 2 years of, or at that point, what 3-4 years of being able to extract profits. Like that could have happened sooner.
Yeah, yeah, and now Donald Trump is going to reap the rewards of that.
Yeah, he is. Now he's going to point to the like he's 100% going to
Right,
try and
and
take credit
people
for
are
this.
going to fall for it because, of course, why wouldn't you? Because that's what makes sense. Good things happen when he's in charge, even if it's the work of the guy before him. And that's really how a lot of people go through life. If you've noticed, like a lot of more affluent people go through life like that, and it sort of just speaks back to like our sort of something very ingrained into our culture where we associate prosperity with things that are irrelevant to it, and that solving that is an even larger challenge than anything else. So let's pick one fight at a time.
Yeah,
and try and get. I think we need to ironically right the ship here by swinging left. I know I'm losing my
no,
directions. I had to
it's
do the
true. I
hand
think
thing where I see which one does the L. The problem is I can't remember which way the L points. Joking.
I think what we're seeing like across the world is like the middle is falling apart. You know, people are becoming more and more polarized, and like we can see this in France with like the left party taking more and more power.
Yeah.
And the center getting weaker and weaker. Macron is deeply unpopular. They just ousted the far right and the far left, just banded together to oust the prime minister.
That is something
Or
that
the
has
president.
not happened before. Or if it has, it's incredibly rare. The idea of, talk about being diametrically opposed to each other. The far left and the far right are incompatible on a fundamental level, and the fact that they came together, it reminds me of that, the meme from Lord of the Rings, like, I never thought I'd die fighting side by side with, I don't know,
An elf.
with an elf. Nerd shit. But like, yeah, no, I never thought I'd be fighting side by side with a fascist. And he's like, "What about fighting side by side with a friend?" And it's like, "No, you're still a fascist. I don't
It's like, I don't know. I don't know if we're at that point yet.
We're not. Let's not go that far." I do think that, we witnessed sort of a very hard swing to the right, but I do feel like we're seeing a quicker and more brutal reaction to it. I mean, if we look again, the fact that the center in France is falling apart. South Korea just experienced one of the lamest coup attempts in modern history.
Yeah.
By a right-wing, pro-capitalistic government. I guess, I don't know what his official title is, actually. I should have looked that up before him. Is he prime minister or is he president? He's president, right?
President.
Yeah, he's president. Yeah, so like I feel like we're sort of seeing like a much faster reaction to that rightward swing, and I feel like that gives me a little hope that we're not just sort of acquiescing to this, and that the world is sort of correcting itself.
We're gonna need to like continue this backlash, right?
Right,
Like again,
right.
I'm listening to this interview with the Harris strategy team, and they don't get it at all. Like they truly, I don't know. Like they're pretty much like their autopsy is really like, we tried, we made progress on some fronts, it just wasn't enough, and like it troubles me. Like I think that I'm worried, and mind you, this is what's going to happen unless we put up a fight, and that's that the Democrats are going to look at this and go, hey, like this was a unique situation we were recovering from. The pandemic still. Biden was unpopular. He was old. We almost won. So what we actually just need is a white man who says the exact same things, runs the exact same campaign that Kamala Harris ran this time. And then we'll win.
And we'll lose. We'll lose to J.D. Vance.
Yeah.
Assuming that relationship survives. I did think it was weird he photoshopped himself as the housewife in that weird Nazi meme he shared.
Yeah, as a trad wife.
Which there's implications there that are rather unsavory. And I just want to leave you with the image.
Where's
that
Usha?
Before we move on?
Yeah. And like the Trump coalition, I'm worried. Like it's definitely going to be more united than it was in 2016.
I mean,
but
unless he dies,
there's still factions.
I feel like there's
side of things.
There's his death, because he's an old man in poor health, is going to fracture the party, and it's going to splinter. And JD Vance doesn't have the charisma to capture all of those splinters, and it's going to be a bloodbath. And that might come, 4 years. It might come next year. I mean, like, my God. When you get to that advanced age, the fact that Joe Biden's still alive amazes me.
It's shocking.
It's shocking.
I think he's going to be dead in the next 4.
Well, yeah, 100%. I mean, like, I guess, like, so for our, like, little post-mortem for the Democratic Party's run in 2024, I guess you could succinctly boil it down to, man, that Joe Biden was terrible for us.
Facts.
Joe Biden and its consequences have been a disaster for the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Although I do think it's funny, if you really want to talk real quickly, this wasn't in our notes, but if you want to talk about about Joe Biden pardoning his son.
Oh yeah.
Because I have a thought. And no, it's not the joke I told in the group chat. That's not. I'm not saying that out loud. But the idea that the media has really shown its hands with how biased they are against Democrat, like clearly,
Mhm.
it's clear that Trump brings in a lot of money for your traditional media outlets. And so they're a lot softer on Trump because they don't want him to go away because he brings
Right.
in so much money. Although it's clear that that is since changed. That seems to be the vibe as people are sort of disconnecting from political news, and
Yeah.
viewership is down among the more liberal, and I say liberal in air quotes because anything left of Fox News is liberal to these people. Their viewership is going down, and it's clear that people don't want to hear about Trump anymore. People don't want to hear what he's up to. But it's clear that traditional media has been hammering Joe Biden for breaking norms by pardoning his son, Hunter Biden.
Yeah, which
Which
is, I mean, I definitely have some thoughts on that. Like, one, I don't think anyone should celebrate this as a win. Hunter
no,
Biden has never done anything for any of you, and he never will.
Yeah.
well, I mean, he wrote he wrote like Tucker Carlson's kids' recommendation letter for Harvard and stuff. So it's not like he hasn't done anything for these people.
Yeah, I think it's crazy that Joe Biden is like willing to break norms when it benefits his immediate family.
Yes.
Like, cool.
Absolutely, I agree.
Like, love this energy coming from you now.
Yes.
I would love to see him pardon any like low-level drug offenders. There are
Fact.
thousands of them in this country.
Just pick
Yeah.
one.
But the point that I was making about the press before we get into the meat of it is that they have been hammering Joe Biden for pardoning his son and
Yeah, they
accusing
have.
him of breaking norms when the guy who's about to come in is going to break more norms than anybody else has.
Yeah, and
And
I don't think that
I
message is resonating at all with
it's
people.
not. It's falling very flat, and it's very obvious that corporate media has a dog in this fight, and that dog is the same dog that has been pissing and shitting everywhere for the last 8 years, and that's Donald Trump. Donald Trump has that dog in him, except for it's a geriatric, mean fight dog who
Yeah, I do
is
think that
incontinent.
we're seeing a rapid decline of power from corporate media.
Yeah,
Like,
and I mean,
I mean,
there's
we saw like, I mean, they've been nonstop covering, the Palestinian protesters as being like anti-Semitic and
Yeah.
and framing Israel as like never being in the wrong. Like, we've seen it for the past year, and like I think that's so obvious to people, like how out of sync this is with like what people can clearly see before their eyes. And like in just this past election, uh, at least on like every outlet that's not Fox, Kamala Harris had way more positive coverage, and you can look at that like statistically. Um, and on top of that, the Democrats like they raised $1 billion this campaign cycle for Kamala Harris.
Jeez.
Yep, it's the most in any presidential campaign in history.
and they ended in
And
debt.
and they ended in debt. And then the weeks leading up to the campaign, like big donor donations went 5-1 to Kamala Harris. And she still lost. And in
I
any
think
other elections before this, like that, I mean, that would have sealed the deal for Kamala Harris.
Mm-hmm.
right. I think it is odd that the shift of big donors to the Democratic Party is
Troubling. Say the
it's
least.
trouble.
I agree.
I think it's more indicative of the fact that Donald Trump and the right wing populism in of itself is a very self-consuming. It's a mess. You can't really control it, and I feel like people are recognizing a little too late that they've lost the plot here, and that that there ultimately is no controlling Donald Trump. Donald Trump is there's one person that can control Donald Trump, and that's Vladimir Putin, right? Like
Facts.
that's not even a joke.
No, I know.
We've known that for years, and I think it was because in the sweeping of 2016 and in the Republican control and all the tax cuts for millionaires, that all these rich wealthy Americans thought that as American democracy breaks down, they would be the privileged class of the oligarchs
Mhm.
because that's where we're sort of heading towards, is this fracturing that, Russia tried, or Russia went through after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and then, Vladimir Putin comes to power, and then suddenly oligarchs are, yeah, it's,
Mhm. Yeah.
nobody wins. I mean, everybody thinks they can make money off of that, but nobody wins. And I think some of these donors are recognizing that to some degree, because I feel like the big money donors that are still behind Trump are the usual suspects of the most
Right.
evil people you could imagine. The second most evil people you can imagine have thrown their weight behind the Democrats, because they recognize that the most evil people they could imagine are going to eat them alive when it comes down to when things fracture and break down.
Mhm.
And, I think the last couple of days have shown the American CEO class that they are not safe from the consequences of the way things are going, and the
Yeah.
violence that is
Mhm.
brewing, and the rhetoric that is.
Yeah, and I think what you're referring to is the United Healthcare CEO that was shot
Right.
in broad daylight. What was it, yesterday?
Mhm.
2 days ago?
Yeah, it's only been
Yeah, a day.
36 hours.
And I mean, it was met with like unanimous cheering.
Yeah.
Right.
Like at least in the online spaces, like no one is torn up over this
I've
guy.
yet I've yet to see people mourning over him.
Except the media.
Yeah, except the
Yes.
It's like,
media.
the mainstream media, and then the wealthy. And I think that speaks, because I mean, we don't know the details of exactly who was behind the assassination.
Mhm.
Right, but I think
But,
we can take a pretty good guess
you
to
can,
motive.
right, right, you can
Yeah.
fill in the blanks. I mean, there was a report circulating from, ABC this morning, that the bullet casings recovered at the scene had, like, what was the phrase? There were three words. It was
They all started with P. Hold on.
deny,
P.
defend, and depose.
I'm
Um,
Deny,
dyslexic.
defend, depose.
which
Yeah,
is which is from a book about how evil the healthcare insurance company is, or corporations are in America.
Mhm.
And,
yeah, and I mean this is like the point that people are at right now.
right, because the wealthy have taken so much. We saw the greatest wealth transfer in human history over COVID
The
Yeah.
greatest wealth transfer in human history so far.
so far. Well, no,
Literally.
there's no more to squeeze up. That's the thing. There is no more to squeeze up, because any
There's
more you
always
try to
more.
squeeze up, no, there isn't. We've hit the limit, and I think today or yesterday was an indicator of that. If you're a
Yeah, I
CEO and
think
you're
you're right.
wondering how much more you can squeeze out of people, you are second guessing that now. You are thinking maybe that's
Yeah.
not such a good idea, because it's
I
the Romanovs again. It's like the modern C class are the Romanovs right now, and that's the French aristocracy before the Reign of Terror.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean
That's
in the midst of this assassination, like right after, I think it was within 10 hours of that assassination, Blue Cross announced that they would like not cover full anesthesia for like long surgeries that go over a certain period, which is an insane time to release
yeah, yeah.
that.
Well, they
Mhm.
immediately walked it back. They
Yeah,
walked it
and they've
back
walked
today.
it back. And they've walked it back. They're not doing that anymore.
I do think it's quite telling. Saw with the assassination, the company had they still went forward with their shareholder meeting, and their
Mhm.
stock price went up a little bit, and I think that
Yeah.
is showing, like, the human beings running these corporations, that, hey, guess what, you're replaceable too in this machine.
Yeah.
This grand
Hmm.
machine, you might think you're driving it, but you might be the steering wheel, but at the end of the day they can still rip you off and slap on a new one.
Mhm.
And I feel like that should really be a wake up call to that. I mean, it's odd trying to appeal to the humanity of a group of people who have made an inordinate amount of wealth off of the suffering of so many millions of people globally, and
Mhm.
Hmm.
exploitation. Not to get back into the Marxist style academic speak.
All right.
I
We'll
don't
put it
see the
like this.
violence lessening.
Yeah, we'll put it like this. So many people who have had their grandmothers have breast cancer that then does
Mhm.
not get covered, and then she dies because she can't afford treatment or goes into lifelong debt that then is paid for by like your family. Um, yeah, we're seeing the ramifications of that.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like Breaking Bad, one of the what is considered widely one of the best TV shows ever made is is about the horrific response to to our healthcare system.
Mhm.
I think it's so. It's we've clearly hit a wall. There's a it feels something feels different in the air. It feels like we've hit a sort of point of no return between what
It
happened in South
does. It
Korea, what
does feel
happened in
different.
France, and what happened here in America yesterday.
Mhm.
Yeah,
There is a point of no
it feels like the first bullet in the class war.
a war that until now has been incredibly one-sided because just
Yeah,
because
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not the first bullet, right? And I think that we're conditioned in this country to not think about social murder as real murder.
Mhm.
But that's when our society fails to take care of people and they die.
right,
Yeah.
right.
And that's when
I mean,
people can't afford groceries and they're going hungry. It's when they have to live on the streets. It's when they
Which
can't
is
afford
disgusting.
routine
my
medical procedures that are readily available in every other
Yep.
country.
right, exactly. My great uncle died because he was denied coverage for a test for a cancer he suspected he had, and that's what ended up killing him
Mhm.
because the insurance company didn't want to pay for that testing. My grandmother, died of, again, too late, too little, too late because of insurance coverage denials. Like everybody knows somebody who has died because
Yeah.
of the industry of healthcare
Mhm.
insurance. Everybody. How many people here, show of hands, although I can't see them, is not going to a doctor over something they probably should get checked out because they can't afford to pay it?
I'm raising my hand high.
Right.
It's a lot of
We all
hands. I
are.
see them now.
We all are.
And if you're not doing that, then you know somebody.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if you're not doing that, you might be doing it tomorrow.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know
And that's
a lot of us are in the prime of our lives right now, but
I
it's a long life.
it is. It is. It's a long life, and it doesn't have to be as miserable as we're making it for ourselves or we're allowing it to
Absolutely.
be made. That's the point. And I feel like that's the to sort of briefly touch back on messaging. That's the message we need to. Yeah, our lives suck. They shouldn't be, but because
Mhm.
Elon Musk wants even more of the pie than he already has, which is most of it. Like if you're at Thanksgiving dinner, right, and your weird uncle who you're not entirely sure how you're related to him, and he's a weird white guy from South Africa, which is, an immediate red flag. Just comes in and sets down and just takes all but a couple crumbs of the pie, you would probably beat the shit out of him. And that's what Elon Musk is doing, and
Mhm.
and that's what he wants. It's clear that like Doge, the stupid Department of Government Efficiency, is just to divvy up and privatize more everything from NASA. They want to take apart NASA, guys. They want to take apart NASA so that Elon Musk can have SpaceX doing all of that.
They want to take apart
They
everything.
want to take apart
They want
That's
to.
everything,
probably going to be successful.
and it's probably
I
going
mean,
to
I
be
know we've memed on Doge being this outs like Elon Musk was rewarded with not even being a part of the government, but I don't know. Like I think there's a very real world where they have a lot of power
Yeah, absolutely.
because it's such a powerful marriage between Donald Trump and Elon Musk.
Mhm.
I cannot wait for that divorce because I feel like Elon Musk is such a deeply unlikable guy. And
Yeah,
like you see the cracks of it because the people close to Trump hate the guy because he's
and
such a
like
deeply unlikable guy.
I I definitely see that argument, and like they are deeply unlikable. At the same time, though, they are both such suckers for power, and they're confirming so like together they have so much ability to do things.
Yeah.
Right, but
They're both just using each other.
the thing about, you know, enforcing strict hierarchies, which is a big thing with conservative thought, is there can only be one
It's
guy at the
basically the
top.
foundation of conservative thought.
It really is. There can only be one guy at the top. And who do you think is topping who? Is it Donald Trump topping it? There's probably a better way to phrase that.
No, you got it.
And I don't think Donald Trump wants to be bottoming Elon Musk. That was worse. We're getting through there. We're working on our messaging. It's a little.
No,
It's a
but I
little.
mean, I think as long as Elon Musk knows that he's not literally the president, like he's good. I don't know. Like I think that they both know how powerful this can be, and they're not ready to see that.
I feel like if Joe Biden truly gave a shit about this country, he would strip Elon Musk of all his American assets and deport him. Like
That'd
if,
be pretty
if Joe
awesome.
Biden really gave a shit, he would do that because that would probably solve a couple of problems at least, and a long list of them. But Elon Musk is certainly a problem, and my God, I wish we could deport him because he came over. He's an illegal immigrant. He
I think he was a
overstayed.
legal immigrant.
No, he was illegal. He overstayed his visa, which is the most common way that an individual illegally immigrates to another country.
Well, did he have to get through a wall? No, because that's not how people
No, but
immigrate.
he did have to get through male pattern baldness, which a
Amazing what
receding
money can do.
hairline. Yeah, amazing what money can do. I can't believe anybody would pay to look like how he does,
Literally.
because he's had some work done.
Definitely.
My God, it's terrible that we live in a country where we could have nice things, but because of a handful of individuals, we can't. And that's not like there's some grand conspiracy to make everybody's lives worse. That's just there's a bunch of greedy little, what's at the top, who want to gobble more of that pie, and there's no more pie left to gobble. And that's how somebody ends up getting shot. That's a historical thing. That's not talking about yesterday. That's just, happens in France, Russia, all over the place. There's almost so much oppression you can squeeze out. What's that quote from Star Wars? The further, the more you tighten your grip, it's we
losing me.
kill ourselves sometimes. Greed is a very strange thing.
Yeah. On another note, just because we've been running pretty long here.
I know. Well, it's because they've missed us, Slade. They've missed us.
It's true. There's a lot to catch up on.
Don't worry. We're gonna try and be more regular. We're gonna meet next week. We did not agree on that beforehand, but I put it out there, and so now we have to.
Now we have to.
See, anyway.
Preemptive, yeah. What do you guys think of this the whole Matt Gaetz fiasco? He's since withdrawn his nomination since the last time we aired. I think it was just such a bizarre series of events that was one picked at all, despite being as hated as he is on Capitol Hill, deeply unpopular guy, even in the Republican Party, especially in the Republican Party, maybe. He steps down from Congress, and then within a few days he's retracted his nomination. Like it's such a bizarre thing that happened.
I mean,
he also says he's not taking his House seat back in the next Congress.
And now he's on Cameo. Do you guys want to get like a cameo of him endorsing this podcast? I think that would be so funny.
Not even a little bit.
Not even a little bit. We should get the worst people to endorse this podcast. We should be the left's Joe Rogan and have a cameo of Matt Gaetz.
But then we have to pay him.
Yeah,
and that it's just hurts my soul.
Yeah, but what's he gonna do with $25? Pay a 17-year-old Florida high schooler for 15 seconds?
Probably.
We'll just do it over Venmo so everybody can see. We can see where the money goes.
I don't know, just a bizarre series of circumstance, though. Series of events that happened. Yeah.
I mean, he's been.
Go ahead, Emma.
He's been being investigated for a while, and I think now just him pick for Attorney General, I think he's scared that it's gonna go through. Like, they're gonna actually prosecute him.
Well,
or even just, release it to the public. It also just seems like, I think he also just did not have the whip that he thought he needed, or that, the Trump team thought that they had. They must have just been, so far off that, there was just no way.
Right. I mean, like the House majority for Republicans, they lost seats, since the midterms last go around in 2022. So it's an even tighter margin now. Donald Trump has taken a couple of, House Republicans into his cabinet,
Yeah.
you know.
So that's another thing
So
too,
that's
is
gonna
like actually so the real quick, the last House race is also finished up just the other day.
yeah.
And there's a 5-seat Republican majority in the House, which is so slim. And then out of that 5-seat majority, Gates has withdrawn, is no longer going to serve. Elise Stefanik is going to be ambassador to the UN or to Israel. I know, I think it is at the UN.
Either one is still funny. Listen, we've
It
all
is.
we've
It's
all
fun.
lived in loved in Elise Stefanik's district.
Yeah.
It's a big move. It's a big move. There are more cows in Amish than people. That of
Yeah.
course requires not counting the Amish as people. But I have some very deeply held issues there. As
Yeah, we're
anybody who knows me
no
know,
fans of Elise Stefanik here.
or the Amish. That's just me
Or
though. They're
they
not going to hear
make
this. They're
great
not going to hear
donuts
this.
though.
I don't know.
Anyways,
I wouldn't trust it.
but then there's also someone I forget who the third person was, but then there's also a third House member that's going to be serving in Trump's cabinet, and so it's actually going to be a 2-seat majority for the Republicans.
Right, and that assumes that everybody's going to show up for a vote, and that everybody's going to fall in line with whatever. So they have a non-functional majority in the House.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. That was pretty crazy. I think that one of the only things that can save us at this point is just like the incompetency. Like,
Yeah.
these are pretty bad political miscalculations by Trump here. I mean, just getting in the way of his own power. And this whole fiasco with Matt Gaetz is pretty embarrassing.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, he's not very smart. Like, I don't see him making smart decisions. He doesn't like listening to people. He doesn't know what he's doing, and so he's doing stupid stuff that's embarrassing him.
Right. They're too convinced of their own secureness.
Absolutely.
They're too high on their own supply.
Yeah, I think pretty immediately it seems like the MAGA coalition might not be as strong as possible. There's also the Senate confirmation for the next majority leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually forgetting the names of both their people, but the Trump guy did not win. It was a blind vote, and the Republicans nominated the McConnell pick for majority leader instead of the preferred MAGA favorite, whose name is escaping me, but he ran the biggest Medicare fraud in the history of the country.
Where do we find these people? Genuine question.
I
Where do
know.
we find these people?
They apply.
Business schools across the country. That's where we find these people. Yeah, is there any more Donald Trump picks that we want to discuss? I know that you guys had a few before we hopped on here.
I mean, Kash Patel is going to head the FBI, who's a full-on QAnoner.
Yeah, that's great. Let's put the conspiracy theorist in charge of, I mean, it's funny though, actually, because the FBI is one of the world's foremost fighters against, child. What's the academic term for? Emma, I feel like you would know this. You were in public health.
The academic term for what?
For I'm trying to figure out hang on. Exploitative material involving children.
I mean, I have a term, but I feel like that's not what you're looking for.
It might be. Let's just see. I can't remember the exact term.
I know you're not talking about not child porn.
No, I was talking about that. Like the
Oh,
FBI,
you were.
The FBI is one of the best government agencies in the world for fighting that stuff. And it's worrisome that, the QAnon, which has a whole thing about, they're also child sex trafficking, is another thing that the FBI is really good at fighting. Very rarely I'm ever going to, to be like, yay, yes. But this is one where I'm going to be like, shout out the FBI, they're doing good work.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it's going to be hijacked by a QAnoner who is, a conspiracy theory that's very famously obsessed with that stuff to the point where it's like, you're not sure why, but, it feels like projection.
Yeah.
It's worrying that one of the world is going to lose one of the best tools we have to fight that sort of evil,
Yeah.
absolutely vile, evil stuff because
'Cause
of Donald
he
Trump.
said he's going to focus his efforts on prosecuting people who
People that went
have
after Trump, right?
slandered Trump. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I'm trying to think of the exact wording.
Yeah,
We're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections, whether it's criminally or civilly, we'll figure that out.
great use of
Meanwhile,
the
the
FBI's
Democrats
resources.
actually should have been using should have been prosecuting
Literally,
fucking these people at like Fox News that propagated this the stop the steal crap. Like they should be in jail. The fact that it's
fact.
Yeah.
just like the people on January 6th who were there and physically broke into the Capitol is a
Mhm.
pretty narrow definition. Like again, this goes back to
I
the social violence versus like physical violence. Like there's
Yeah.
still
people
don't
that were
understand why.
manipulated and broke in, and there's also this whole media apparatus that prompted them to do that.
I still don't understand why we went back with Merrick Garland's after, I don't know why that was such an ineffective pick.
Yeah.
This is why we didn't go after any of these people who committed like actual crimes, like sedition.
Mhm.
Yeah. Seditious conspiracy to overthrow the United States government.
Because they did that. They tried. There was a
They
coup.
did.
Remember? It was the world's second worst coup so far. Just recently dethroned by the South Koreans. What a world we live in that we are having, in these first world's developed democracies having coup attempts. This is like I feel like if you went back, 80 years and like talked to some Cold War paranoid CIA agent, it was just like, yo, we're gonna get couped.
They're
Along
gonna
with
be like, damn, why would we finance that?
right. We don't even know how to do those anymore. We've lost our edge. And that is a dark day for America that we have lost our ability to do a proper coup. That's L's in the chat, folks. There's no chat, but I felt
That's how we
the
need to
need to say
run.
that.
That's what we need to run in the next election. We're gonna do coups right.
We're gonna do them
Exactly.
right.
We're gonna make
coup
coups great
Canada.
again.
We're gonna coup Canada. That's gonna be, oh my god, Canada. I just remembered how Donald Trump threatened to annex Canada to Justin Trudeau.
Yes! What was that?
I also like the idea that, like, Canada could become the 51st state, as if Canada doesn't have several state-like entities called provinces. Like Donald Trump doesn't know that. And
I'm
they're, like,
pretty
right
sure-
next door.
Pretty sure I saw Bernie posted something about that, and then he said, okay, so does that mean we can adopt universal health care, and listed a bunch of other things.
Right.
I love Bernie. I wish Bernie were younger so that I
I
could
know.
want him to run again.
Bernie wasn't 80 years old.
Facts.
He's just, Donald Trump
Yeah,
threatens
I hope
Justin Trudeau.
I hope that he's like featured prominently in 2028. Honestly, like I almost think it's like worth a presidential run just to like shift the conversation.
We run into the problem where he's old.
It's
I don't think he's going to be around for 2028. I love the guy. I don't think it's realistic to put any presidential hopes. And I mean, he did run for Senate again, so I guess he's planning on being around for the next 6 years. But I mean, the House just rejected the Democratic effort to release the Matt Gaetz ethic report that just happened within the last 10 minutes, 20 minutes. I was just reading that off of my phone because it popped up and it was like, oh, hey, we were just talking about that. See, we are also here on the front lines covering the things that matter in live. Anyway, yeah. So, I don't know, guys. What do you think? Should we annex Canada? Let's start talking about that. Let's bring some legitimacy to that conversation. Do you think we should annex Canada?
Listen, I have bad feelings about Canada. Not because of Canada.
I have bad feelings toward Canada because of Canada.
I have bad feelings toward Canada because of Canadians.
Right, right. I think that Canada has some of the greatest PR in the Western world, and that they're, like the entire world believes that they're all like so polite in such a nice country when,
I agree.
when they have been absolutely, horrific, savage colonizers. Like,
Absolutely.
oh my God, the Canadians, in my experience, Canadians are so much more racist towards Native Americans or, First Nations people than
Yeah.
Americans are. And it's funny because in America, they're like, do these people even still exist? In Canada, they're like, they do exist and we hate them. We hate them so much. The most vile racism I have firsthand experienced has been by Canadians. And that's common. That's just a common point of view among them. And I think it's wild that they have such a reputation for being so polite when they're so viciously racist. I don't want
Maybe we
Canada
should
joining the country just simply because of how much I despise Canadians.
continue Manifest Destiny, but let the indigenous people here do it to the Canadians.
I might be on board with that. I don't know. I gotta pitch it back to some people.
It pleases everybody. The weapons industry will be so happy. We can load everybody up.
We ain't stopping until we find that Tim Hortons bastard. And anyway, before we get too far into it, are there any particular? I think we wanted to talk about the new AG pick, but we're already running a little late.
Yeah, I was gonna say, why don't we talk about that next week?
We'll talk about that next week. Who knows? It might be a different person.
The TLDR. She's a longtime Trump loyalist, and that seems to be the only qualifications for any position.
Fact.
Which is true for most of his picks for any portion of government. Like his ambassador to France, Jared Kushner's father, who does not speak French. Crazy. Anyway, so with all of that being said and all of the wonderful things we talked about, let's do our fun thing to end the episode
Our fun thing.
Our fun thing. Our therapy mandated fun thing. Court ordered.
Our fun thing is going to be talking about our Spotify rap. Who wants to go first?
I think Slade should go first since it was his idea.
I agree.
Yes, it was my idea. And also, I can't access my Spotify Wrapped for some reason. Oh my God, it showed up.
You got it?
We're getting a worldwide premiere of Slade's Spotify Wraps.
Live.
This is going to be embarrassing.
Oh, it's so...
How does this work?
It's not as fun as it used to be, I will say that. It seems to be worse. And I feel like it's because they laid off so many people, you can tell. Like, Wrapped used to have little fun things like, what city you shared most in common with music. And instead it was all this AI garbage.
Alright, my top artists are the Rolling Stones, Heartless Bastards, Greta Van Fleet, the Beatles, and the Strokes.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm not gonna lie, that is the most Slade answer that it would have been. All right, Emma, what was
It's not as embarrassing as I was hoping it. That's not as embarrassing as I thought it could have been, though.
That's true. Mine's super embarrassing, which is why I want to go last.
Mine's mildly embarrassing, but not really. So my top artists are Olivia Rodrigo, Sabrina Carpenter, Billie Eilish, Noah Kahan, and Kendrick Lamar.
Oh, okay. We had two overlapping top artists then.
Ooh.
Noah Kahan, and Sabrina Carpenter.
Yeah.
Sabrina Carpenter is rolling. She's sweeping rap this year.
She is. I can't believe her boyfriend potentially cheated on her. I don't know. Have you seen that guy? He looks like he got hit by a truck, and he cheated on his...
That's always how it happens. It's always the guys who are insecure who end up cheating. Guys who, have had enough relationships, they don't need more. Like, they're not going to cheat on you. They've done it, and they're done.
So other than those, most of my other three artists are all like... I like my indie stuff, okay? I like my weird music, and I'm realizing now that I don't want to talk about my Spotify Wrapped. It's gonna sound so bad. I will say that I've had the same top artist for like the last 3 years, and they just got dethroned, and that was surprising for me. And they were dethroned by a indie band from Toronto that I almost had the chance to see, but my girlfriend did not realize that her driver's license was enhanced and would have gotten her over the border, and so we couldn't go because she didn't have her passport because it had expired. And I threw that anecdote in there because I jokingly give her trouble for it every now and then. Whenever I see that band, I was like, "Oh, hey, this is the band we couldn't see because you couldn't read your license."
Are you gonna tell us who it is?
No, I'm not that
Okay, then.
brave. I'm not that brave. I'm not that brave. I will leave the bravery to the real heroes like Slade and Emma here. I am
I
a
read
mine.
coward
mine.
to my core.
Will you tell us your top song?
No.
Oh, okay
I
then.
just looked at it. No, it's Espresso. I fell asleep with Espresso playing one time because it was
It's a great song.
it was a great song. It's a great song. I still sing it to myself. And then there's, the SNL skit version, the, Domingo, that also pops in. And I'm like, because whenever I'm talking to my, our mutual friend Matt, I will open with the the hey Matt, came all this way, had to explain, stuff to him, and he hates it. I should see how he's doing. He hasn't talked to me in a bit. Anyway, that's our show for tonight.
My top song was "Heat Above" by Greta Van Fleet.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that
was our show for tonight. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you. We appreciate your patience and waiting for us to make a new episode. We're gonna be a bit more regular. It's it's still difficult with the holiday season. We tried so many times to get together over the last couple of weeks, but it became impossible. We're trying. We're really trying.
In my
We're doing our
defense,
best.
I typically work like 8 to 10 every day.
In my defense, I'm depressed.
Valid.
That's the defense I'm going with. So we'll see you all next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I don't know how to. I'm not good with goodbyes, unfortunately.
You just say
Thank
goodbye
you
and
for
then end the
listening.
stream.
Thank you
Goodbye,
for
thank
listening.
you.
We love you. No, wait, that
Bye.
was too soon. Now I feel bad.